So today I want to speak to you about humanism. Is humanism in photography over? Maybe you are familiar with humanistic photography, which is an empathetic form of photography, which is focused on humans. The human being is at the heart of the photos. And there are some really iconic photos which belong to humanism, which are found in museums. So, for example, the Magnum photo agency dedicated itself to humanistic photography, and several members of Magnum and also others have focused on humanistic photography. For example, Sabine Weiss, Henri Cartier-Bresson, Robert Capa, Robert Doisneau, André Kertész, Walker Evans. There are many. Humanism was widespread in Europe in the 1920s, so 100 years ago. And it was particularly in France after World War II, where it was fueled by the rise of the photo magazines, which could show the photos. So the humanism became particularly strong in photography in the of the 20th century as a response to the atrocities of the war. The focus was often on the lower class and on the people which are disadvantaged by conflict, by economic situations, or by prejudice. And the humanism in photography is also called poetic realism or human interest, which affirms the idea of a universal underlying human nature in photography. So the suffering is not something personal, but it's something universal. Most groundbreaking compilation of humanistic photos was compiled by Edward Steichen at the MoMA in 1951 in his The Family of Man series. There he united 503 photographs by 273 photographers from 68 countries. So it's really a global work, The Family of Man. Have a look at it if you haven't seen it before, because it's really a keystone in photography and humanistic photography, but in photography in general. But what is left of humanistic photography today? Does humanism live on? Even today, artists and street photographers in particular try to capture the emotions of the people in everyday life. This is what we do when we walk in the streets. Maybe the suffering is not as evident as it was in the war or just after the war today, but it's still there. And the war was really destructive, so it was very evident, but the suffering of humans is still there, only that often we close our eyes. It's also more hidden, so perhaps it's not less important, it's even more reprehensible. So we are very wealthy, we are living in a kind of social tranquility, at least we were until last year, before the war and the Ukraine spread. And we were in a kind of peaceful decades. It's changing now, but still the social injustices were present and still are. But we also observe that there is something like an inhibition to show this social suffering. It's clear because we have seen so many photos, so many poor people or underprivileged people or people in developing countries have been photographed, and we have seen all these photos of sufferings, and perhaps we're not that interested in that anymore. So perceiving them, showing them and photographing them today has a different dimension, and we have to be very careful, because photographing the homeless and people in distress is no longer something cool. It's no longer something that makes people get aware of things. We are aware of their presence, but it is today more an ethical no-go in street photography. We have seen all these images, we continue to experience them every day and every shopping zone of major cities on our planet. And there's no point in photographing these people in their conditions any longer. I think photographing people in difficult situations can be appropriate if you offer a solution together with your photo. So, for example, I think of the project by Joshua Coombs that I learned about through Valérie Jardin and her podcast at the time, Hit the Streets, which I liked a lot. So Joshua Coombs has his project, Do Something for Nothing. And this is a wonderful project because he goes out to the homeless people and offers them a new hairstyle. He cuts the hair and then takes a photo of them. And so in this way, he gives the people something back. He gives them back their dignity. In general, I would say that giving back something to the streets is something really common, or maybe even a cornerstone in street photography. I've seen this very much in the collectives, the street collectives who meet and put their photos up in a guerrilla exhibition somewhere in a city, using walls wherever, and telling the people that they can take the photos, maybe leaving something that then they offer to the homeless people. So there's a bit of this humanistic idea behind this. And in humanistic photography, the photographers tried to understand what makes us human, and they tried to show the positive. So that's something that we often do in street photography. We don't want to criticize or show bad things, but we want to have fun and enjoy the little joys of life after the horrors of war. That was the case in the humanistic photography 100 years ago. And in our days, we can still use this as a tool to give back dignity to people. Or maybe it slips too much into voyeurism. So I think it's a very fine line that we have to deal with in order to document things with dignity without getting into pure voyeurism and showing off. I think that in order to understand people, humans all over the world, humanistic photography remains a helpful and valuable approach, still today, 100 years later. So perhaps the problems of mankind have shifted, but I still think that everyday life in the cities offers different themes that in the days of the founders of humanistic photographers were different, but they are still there in our modern life. And the major issues such as migration, refugees, also the pandemics, wars, unfortunately, with all their impact on humanity, on people, on the emotional life in general, regardless of the ethnic origins, that's still there. Cultures, religions, it's more topical than ever, perhaps today with what is going on in Europe right now, in the Ukraine. So despite the approximately 100 years that have passed since the emergence of the humanistic photography, I think that it's now up to us street photographers to apply to the theme of humanism to our time. So let's try to get this idea 100 years later and apply it to what we're living through today. We can try to take on new ways and forms of expression with the main basic idea to document and to give back dignity, to give visibility and dignity. So let it take on new ways and forms of expression together in street photography. I think that's a good challenge. I think I will try to work this a little out in my photos, because the core content of humanism is still largely the same in today's street photography. I think it doesn't really change. So in the end, yes, we can do street photography for fun, just to be with our head somewhere else, but we can also really employ it to show things that are going on in our societies in an objective way, or in a critical way, or in a beautiful way, but always respecting the dignity of the people.